It is time to welcome in my old friend, and I never thought in my wildest dreams I would be saying this. His name is Ken Holland, the Vice President and General Manager of the Los Angeles Kings. How the heck did this happen?
I'm a little surprised myself, to tell you the honest truth. At the end of last year, when I was done with, we parted ways with the Edmonton Oilers. Gary Bettman and Colin Campbell were nice enough to give me a job with the hockey operations department. I enjoyed my year. I know my wife enjoyed the year. And as I got into about February and March, started to get the itch. And the phone rang from Luke. I'm a Western, Midwestern guy. We've either lived in our whole life in either Vernon, BC, Medicine Hat, Alberta, when I was scouting with you from 85 to 94, Detroit or Edmonton. So when this came along, being out west, Luke Robitaille, I've got a relationship with him. He played for the Red Wings in 2002. Wonderful ownership here with Mr. and Mrs. Anschutz. They have a good hockey team. It all made sense to me to come back here and see if I can make a little bit of a difference.
Ken, last time we had you on, you were actually the general manager of the Edmonton Oilers at that time. And you were talking about living in Vernon in between being a goaltender for Adirondack and before you had gotten the call from me and Jimmy to become a scout with Detroit. And you enlightened us into what your occupation could possibly have been. Vic?
It's true. And there's a joke here that you really weren't hired for VP and GM of the Kings, but instead you were hired more to go to your roots. And so we just wanted to make sure that we're interviewing for the correct position here. So
maybe you're vice president GM of Healthy Home Center in Irvine.
It does go back to my roots. I think my mother would be very pleased with that move, but I fall in love with being involved in hockey. Fortunate that it's hockey and not a vacuum business somewhere, cleaning business.
Just anybody that didn't hear that podcast, Ken almost became a
Electrolux. My mother suggested that I take a job as an Electrolux vacuum cleaner salesman in 1985, when my playing days were over, when there was not a big demand for 5'8" goaltenders, 29-year-old goaltenders. Fortunately, Neil Smith and Jim Devellano reached out to me about a week later and offered me a job as a Western Canada scout, and here we are.
Let's get to the real business of hockey. Your former team, the Oilers, I'm sure you've got your eyes on them. Everybody does right now. And they're 2 wins away from going to the final again. What do you think's different about this team than the team you had last year?
I think it's first off the experience of being through that playoff run last year. We had gone to the Finals 4 in 2023. And then last year, or 2022, and then 2024, they were down 3-2 against Vancouver, came back, won. You're down 2-1 to Dallas. Last year, you got to win Game 4, won the series. You're down 3-0 to Florida and got it to Game 7. So I think those experiences are very valuable and part of the process to eventually win the Cup. Probably some good moves by Stan Bowman with the addition of Jake Wallman and Klingberg on the back end have helped the team have real better depth on the back end. I think they're probably hoping to get Ekholm back here at some point in time. But I think for a lot of the players are the same team that we had last year with Wallman and a couple other players that haven't had the impact but they're on the team. But it's a good hockey team, obviously. It's been through the battle tested. And all those experiences have paid dividends this year, probably when they were down 2-0 to LA and down in the third period in Game 3 and down the third period in Game 4 and found a way to win both games. Just being in those situations over and over again, you get more and more comfortable.
Ken, you played goal. We mentioned that earlier, and you've got a different philosophy on goaltenders, but we won't get into that. I just want to ask you, because this is really confusing to me. Stuart Skinner, at times, looks like he'll be the Achilles heel of the Edmonton Oilers. And Kelvin Pickard is his backup, and he looks like he couldn't carry the mail for the Edmonton Oilers. Now you get into this year, and particularly in this round, and Skinner looks great. And Pickard looked great until he got hurt. Which is the real guy? Is it Skinner, the one that's the Achilles heel, or Skinner, the one that's it's prime beef?
You know what ends up happening, and we had a little bit in Detroit in those days when you've got high octane. Lots of people think you win because of your offense and you lose because of your defense or your goaltender, and it's not true. The reality is, it takes everybody to win. And I think having Connor and Leon, when the feeling is you win because you're high octane and you lose, there's no doubt that it's at times with Stu, his play can go up and down. Last year, he got pulled out for a couple of games in the Vancouver series. Pick went in and did a great job, won a game, had another game. And in those 3-4 games, it was an opportunity for the goaltender coach and Stu to get things settled down. And he played great from then on all the way through the rest of the playoffs. And this year, obviously, Stu had a couple of rough outings the first couple of games against LA. Wonderful job by Pick. And now Stu's back in. Stu's 26 years old. He's just really coming into the age when you're mature as a goaltender. There's so much pressure to deal with. And I look at other goalies around the league, top goalies, and they go in stretches. That not everybody plays at a high level all the time. You really probably need two goalies. I'm a big Stu Skinner fan. We did a lot of winning with him when I was there, and they did a lot of winning with him this year. He wins 35, 40 games every year, 30 to 40 games every year. Certainly there's some nights the offense does it, but there are nights when your defense and your goaltender have got to be the difference, and he is. But I think because he has those moments, probably, as we're talking, reflect back to probably Chris Osgood in his days in Detroit. Ozzy won 403 National Hockey League games and won a couple of Stanley Cups, and there were moments when he had some rough patches. It happens to most guys other than the elite guys. But basically, I think Stu's got a lot of battle, a lot of compete, a lot of determination. When you play goal in Canada on a team that's got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and the expectations, you're dealing with a lot of pressure on a day-to-day basis. And when you got those moments in time when you're off your game, it would be easy to lose your confidence. But to Stu's credit, he digs in, goes to work, and always seems to bounce back.
So part of your task in your new role now is to upend your former team, and the Kings have gone down 4 consecutive springs to the Oilers in the opening round of the playoffs. So as you take this club over, what's your first order of business? You've got $21.7 million in cap space, roughly. You do have 5 unrestricted free agents on the current roster. Where do you look to begin?
I think we've got a big decision on defense. You got to be good on the back end. And when Drew Doughty was out for the first 60 games, they did a great job in eating up those minutes, because Drew plays 21, 22, 23, 24 minutes a night, and they had a real good year. So I've got to figure out Gavrikov, and does he want to come back? What's it going to take? And if not, we got to be ready through our pro scouting meetings to make some decisions on the back end. As you mentioned, David Rittich in goal is an unrestricted free agent. Got to make a decision on David, whether he's the guy or we want to go another direction. And then a little Kuzmenko, obviously, is an unrestricted free agent. It was a real nice pickup from the trade deadline on. Found a home here for the last 20 games, played on the power play and really helped the power play. So those are probably the most important decisions between now and the beginning of July. In the meantime, talk to the coach. I've met with him a couple of times already, going to meet again just to continue to go over the roster, what he thinks about the team. We have pro scouting meetings coming up. I'm looking forward to meeting with, spending time with the pro scouts, Nelson Emerson, Glenn Murray, get their thoughts, which has already been going on, and ultimately determine a plan from critical time in the off season is from about June 23rd, 24th, 25th, the week of the draft, until July 10th. That 3 weeks there is when you really rebuild or make decisions on your team for the upcoming season. Obviously, the unrestricteds we've talked about, working the phones, talking to general managers to see what they might be thinking about their teams. Is there a trade possibility? And then get ready to make some decisions in that 3-week window.
I want to also ask you, because you obviously go back decades in this, as does Neil. So this question really is for both of you, that as the decades have gone on, and let's use a 30-year window, How has constructing a team changed? And obviously, there's the salary cap that is here now that wasn't in place when both of you started. But what are the biggest differences in terms of building a team that you say, or is it fundamentally the same?
I think it's similar. I guess I would say to you first, Vic, for me personally, spending time with Neil from 1985 to 1994, and Jim Devellano, who was the architect of the Islanders, scouting and understanding the importance of talent. And then from there, the development of that talent. And then going to work in 94 to 97 with Scotty Bowman and Jim Devellano, and being in the office every day as the assistant general manager, was an opportunity. And I was general manager of the Adirondack Red Wings. So it was my opportunity to build teams and understanding the importance of, I call it the engine, the group of players that drives your team, and then all the supporting, the importance of chemistry, the importance of checkers, the importance of the ingredients that you think you need to win. And I don't know that when I look at the teams that win, they got an engine that drives their team. They know how to check. When Scotty Bowman came to Detroit in 1994, I'd say his message was defense. We were playing high octane, high risk hockey, and you'd win 5-3 and come in the regular season. In the playoffs, you'd give up 3, but you'd only score 2 and you'd be out. So the importance of your team understanding how to check, how to defend, how to protect the lead. And those are the veterans that you try to bring in because those players understand it. That's coming back to the experience we talked about for the Edmonton Oilers, all those experiences. That's what happened in Detroit. And I think other teams have gone through the same thing. So I think it's similar. Certainly the players are a little bit different. They expect to get to, I think 20 years ago, they expected to spend time in the American League. They don't expect to spend much time in the American League now as they once did. The cap since 2005, but you still got to make the same decisions within the cap. So I think it's a group of players. I call it the engine. It's a group of 4 to 8 players that drive your team, set the tone. And then if you don't have the engine, you got to build the engine. You got to draft, you got to develop. You probably got to be bad for a while and you got to build the engine. And then once you get the engine, then it's going to work to build all the different pieces and parts that are necessary. Get some scoring, get some checking, get some size, get some shot blockers, get a guy that can run the power play. Maybe he's in that 4 to 8 group, and the goaltending, obviously. So I think it's similar. In my mind, Neil could jump in from his days building the New York Rangers.
Yeah, but I think, Ken, just to follow, everything you said I totally agree with and have thought the same way. But the one place where I wonder if it's changed, because I haven't been in the chair in this era, and I've always told people that the 2 most important decisions you make as a GM are, number 1, who's the coach? That's the most important decision. And the second most important decision is who's the goalie. And then I would go on from there. Now, is that still the case, or is it changed a little bit?
I would agree with you. I always say that the most important decision a general manager has to make is the coach. And I think in goaltending, I kind of look at goaltending. I'm a bit of an NFL fan. There's probably 8 to 10 elite quarterbacks that are a cut above everybody else. I think it's similar in hockey. There's probably a group of 8 to 10 goalies that are a cut above everybody else, and we all have a similar name. And then there's a lot of guys, they're NHL goalies or they're NFL quarterbacks, and they probably need more pieces. So part of that is in Detroit, it was, I guess, building the defensemen. Obviously, Nick Lidstrom and Chris Chelios and Brian Rafalski and Nicholas Cronwall, and certainly I look at the impact that when we did the deal for Matthias Ekholm at the trade deadline 3 years ago, his impact on the Edmonton Oilers, trying to build a defense. But so I'm with you on the goaltender, but I think goaltender and then the group of defensemen, and your team you can't be turning pucks over and playing high event hockey. It's tough to go on long playoff runs when you're constantly giving the other team opportunities, when you're playing the top half the league in the first round and then the top quarter of the league in the second round and then the top 4 teams. That you've got to play lower event hockey. And I think some of that comes with the experience, the coach, the impact of the coach. But you certainly have to have good goaltending. I don't know if you have to have an elite guy, but you got to have good goaltending. Your team's got to know how to check.
Ken, before Rob Blake decided to resigned from the Kings, and him and Luke made that decision. And you were afar then, probably never thinking that there would be an opportunity in LA. But tell me, what were your thoughts on Darcy Kuemper? Because he was with Washington. It didn't go well. It obviously went very well in Colorado. And I think from afar, from here, it's gone very well for him with the Kings. And I just wondered, now that you haven't been the GM for him as a player yet, did you have thoughts on him from afar when you were watching the Kings?
And he also played, I think, well in Arizona prior to Colorado. So he's been a guy that Darcy's 35 years of age now. So I think goalies can play better older than they don't have to skate up, and you have to understand the position, and the gray hairs you get are a value in net where up front when you got a skater and defensive. It's there you start speed is an effect. So he's at a great age. He's been a good goalie in the National Hockey League for many years. Had a tough things didn't work out in Washington. Obviously, we played them when they won the Cup in 2022. We played them in the third round. I think he got hurt a couple of games into the series, but played great for LA last year. And certainly his play and the team, we were top 3 or 4 in the league in goals against, were major factors as to why they had 105 points and really liked their chances going into this series against Edmonton. And we're up 2-0 in that series. So certainly I feel good having Darcy Kuemper. And now we've got to decide if we want to come back with the tandem of Darcy and David Rittich or make a change. And again, I'm going through that with all the people and talking to the goalie. Bill Ranford's the head of the goalie department, talking to the coach. I'm trying to get my arms on around a lot of things here, and knowing that in the next couple of weeks, I got to start to make some decisions.
They say this is a copycat league. And of course, everybody would want to copy what Bill Zito and Paul Maurice have done in Florida. But the truth is that the 4 teams that are remaining, Panthers, Hurricanes, Stars, and Oilers, all have different DNA. And very often it's not what you can see that's right in front of you, but what you can see beyond that. In a perfect world, how do you want to build this team? We did touch on a few minutes ago about what your salary cap looks like and your impending UFAs are. But aside from goaltending, defense, what's the perfect mold for Ken Holland's Kings for 25-26?
It's all the catchwords. I think size, speed, skill are compete, goaltending, and a coach behind the bench that knows how to get the most out of his players. But I think when we played Vegas in the round of 8, the year they won the Stanley Cup, I think we'd acquired Bukestad at the deadline. And a year before, we acquired Ekholm, and we had Vinny Desharnais. But I think Vegas and Edmonton were the 2 biggest teams of the final 8. Vegas, I think size is of importance, but there's lots of room for us. Undersized players. You got a good goaltending, and you want to know how to, you got to have defensemen that know how to defend, that know how to block shots. Got to be good on special teams. I think you got to find those players. And you got to build it. You got to build it. Again, like you said, I think Rob Blake has done a great job. The signing of Edmondson was a great job. The trade to bring in Darcy Kuemper, the signing of Warren Foegele on the third line with Danault and Moore, and Foegele's had 20 goals, 25 assists. I think he was plus 35. So he was a great addition. The growth of Byfield, the growth of Laferriere, the growth of Brandt Clark. So there's all these things so when I come in here, it's the continued growth of the young players. Blake's made a deal to bring in a goalie. I got to just figure out, but it's a 2-goalie league. It's not a 1-goalie league. It's not where Glenn Hall plays 80 out of 80 games and everybody just sits there and watches one guy. You need 2 goalies. Even if one plays 50, the other's going to play 30. So it's a 2-goalie league. And then obviously Drew Doughty missed about 60 games last year, had a real tough ankle break. Need him to have a real good offseason and come back. Drew's 35, but I brought in, one year I traded for a 37-year-old defenseman in Detroit by the name of Chris Chelios. He played 9 years for me until he was 46 years old.
And he'd still be playing if he had his way.
The stars, they can beat Father Time, and maybe they're not superstars, but they're still a really good player. Drew Doughty is still he's a really good player. Part of being good is internal. It's the growth of some of your young players. It's some people and then it's some of the moves that the management has to make to try to have all the pieces fit together.
Ken, somebody threw a theory at me yesterday, and I want to throw it at you just because I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. It's a copycat league. Everybody's looking to win the cup. Everybody looks at who does win the cup and says, okay, that's what we've got to be like now. Do you think because of the fact that Florida Panthers, and I'm not saying they're going to win it this year, but they won it last year, because they're such a physical team, that there'll be that the skill side, the skill players, you might get a discount on them at free agent time because not as many people will be shopping for that. They'll be shopping for physicality because they think is what's going to win over, say, the skill. For example, Marner, who's an all-skill player, might not get what we thought he would get. What are your thoughts on that? Is there anything to that?
Because I don't want to talk about any specific players, but
not specific player. I'm sorry.
Two things as you're saying that. I disagree for two reasons. One, you need skill to make the playoffs. And so, what really happens is the game is a little bit different in the Stanley Cup playoffs than the regular season. And it's a credit to the players. They dig deeper. If they played that way for 82 games like they play in the playoffs, you might only have a half a team left by the end of the season. I watched that Four Nations. That was a 10-day tournament. They were dropping the real good players. There must have been 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 players in that tournament hurt. So you can't play that way over 82 games. So you need a team over 82 games that can get you into the playoffs. It's got to be leaned towards skill, in my opinion, to get in. And then secondly, I would say with the cap going up from this year from 88 to 95, and then it's going from 95 to 104-ish, and then it's going to 113. Teams are going to want skill because only half the teams make the playoffs, half miss. It's hard to get in. People take getting into the playoffs for granted, but it's hard to make the playoffs. So I still think that people are going to want skill. Cap is going in leaps and bounds here over the next 3 years, and you need skill to get into. And then obviously that's where you build. Then part of your team is built for the playoffs. Every year we see some players that are not as important to their team during the regular season, and they're important to their team come playoff time. Fourth lines. You see the importance of fourth lines. Because again, when you get to the playoffs, over 82 games, you're playing there's some teams that they're not quite as good. But then when you get to the top 16, they're all almost 100-point teams. They're real well built. They're good hockey teams. And then if you went around, you're into the round of 8. You need depth. You got to roll 4 lines. You're going to have injuries. You need people to come in when people go down. I still think it's going to be similar mindset heading into just the players are going to, because the cap's going up, they're going to make a little bit more.
So before we let you go, I got to ask you what your thoughts are on these two series, Dallas and Edmonton, and then, of course, Carolina and Florida. Carolina having won the last game. And have you got any thoughts you could share with us about those two series?
Actually, last night's game 4 was probably more with the Carolina winning, basically 1-0. It's 2 empty net goals, but more of what I expected. Probably was a little surprised with the way things went. Although game 3 was one going into the third period, and it's a funny third period. But so that series a little surprised me. All 4 teams they've been good for a while. Like Carolina's been good, Dallas has been good, Edmonton's been good, Florida has been to the finals twice in a row. So there are 4 built teams. I think Dallas has been in 3 of the past 4 Final Fours. Carolina every year is real good. Great coach in Rod Brindamore. So these are 4 of the elite teams in the National Hockey League. Surprised at times when you see a 6-1 score. There was a 6-1 score there in the Edmonton game, but I think over 7 games, 6 games or 5 games, more nights than not, it's going to be really close. And they're 4 of the elite organizations and teams in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, there's certainly no Cinderellas in this Final Four. Like there is some years, there's a Cinderella goes into that. I don't know if you heard Paul Maurice after the game last night, but he had a great quote. Somebody said, "What did you think of Bobrovsky for you tonight?" And he said, I didn't like him on the second and third goal. I thought his gap was way too big.
Yeah, I agree.
Kenny,
Thanks, guys.
thanks for you just got to LA and you're good enough to come on this with us, and we really appreciate it. And hope once you get into the season, maybe we can have you come back to us again about the Kings.
Vic, that's one of my mentors. I got a couple of mentors, Jim Devellano and Neil Smith. And I'm forever grateful for, remember 1985, the phone rang and it was Neil Smith on the other end of the line. And actually the coach had recommended Neil was the general manager of the Adirondack Red Wings. And the head coach, my mind's gone blank here, but Bill Dineen recommended to Neil that they reach out to me and talk to me about a scouting. Bill had lived across the street in the same condo complex. And on road games, I'd drive with Bill to the rink so that my wife could have a vehicle and go by. We had 2 little kids at that time, 3 and 1. And then Neil reached out to me, and Neil said that Bill Dineen had recommended to Neil hire me as a Western scout. And Neil was talking to Jimmy D. And the next day I got on the phone with Neil and Jimmy D, and they offered me the job as the Western Canada scout. So I wouldn't be in the business if it wasn't for Bill Dineen and Neil Smith and Jim Devellano. And I'm forever grateful for that. And then from 1985, for about 4 years, Neil and I worked really closely. We were similar age, spent a lot of nights on the road together, talking hockey, had lots of laughs, greatest years of my life. And I learned a lot from Neil in player evaluation and driving the car at about 120 miles an hour in a snowstorm between Windsor and Toronto. And I was happy that I'm here.
Who knew that you and I, 40 years apart, would be linked by Neil Smith? You at the beginning of the careers and me and him at the end.
That's good. I enjoy call me anytime, guys. I appreciate you guys do a great job, and thanks for having me on.
Thank
you,
you, Ken. And a reminder that our website is NHLwraparound.com, and also Stanley Cup Date